All right, so we are back for part two of the Emmett's and ROI Insights podcast with Alec Coleman, CEO and founder of Coleman Web Designs. Part one, we went through an introduction with Alec and learned about his business, the way he does things, as well as his 7-step process, which ended, that episode rather, ended, I think, at the design phase, which is where we were at the time of recording. We are now complete. My website has gone live, and I am very happy with it. Alec did an incredible job. He made good on all of his claims and all of his promises. I am very impressed with the quality and the whole process. So I wanted to talk about the second half of the 7-step process, but I want to allow Alec to outline those 7 steps again and add anything he wants to add before we jump into that.
Yeah, I think the first call going up to the design phase for us, Dan and I had already done discovery and planning, which were our first 2 steps leading into design. And after that, we go to development. So Dan had spoke about those first 3 steps. After that 4th step for us is development. So we have a interactive design that we provide through our development link, which is more or less for the client to play around with the site. It's not fully interactive yet, but it gives the client a really good idea of where our team is going in terms of our design journey. After that, we fine tune all the development. So everything from your form submissions to making sure all the links are working properly, all your URL plugs are optimized for search engines, everything that we can possibly do on the back end of your site to make it a seamless operation for users to come on there. And then we test. So that's step 5, and that's test. And in that phase, we'll work with the client to make sure our forms are working, submitting to the correct email. All the social media links are routing correctly. Any third-party applications that we've set up, we're testing with, test accounts and things like that. Step 6 is we launch with client approval, and step 7 is our post-launch quality assurance. So making sure after we go live, if we need to change servers or things like that, all that back-end work is done properly. Your emails are not affected. Sometimes when you're changing where you're hosting a site or where your domain is being hosted, it can affect your email as well. So everything from making sure that the design and development transferred to the live version smoothly, everything is still working properly. You still have access to everything like your back-end accounts, your emails are working properly. And that process for us, we normally do it for, 2 to 4 weeks, depending on the project. Post-launch QA, where we're repeatedly checking the site, making sure that everything's going smoothly because we just launched, and obviously answering any client questions. In addition to that, we do our best to provide any training experiences that they may need that are specific to their project. And that all happens in our post-launch QA.
Yes, and that's where we are at now. I just this morning thought of a couple quick changes that I needed to be done. I neglected to ask for the favicon to be placed onto the sites. Right now it just says WordPress, and I wanted to use my favicon logo. So we're going to add that. And there was another change I wanted to make with the headlines to some of the pages after speaking to my father, who made some critical suggestions that to the branding, of which he's a much more simple person than I in terms of design, more talented at it. So he helped me clarify a couple things I want to do. So you're going to send me a Loom video of a little walkthrough there. We're going to get that done. So just sort of a testament and an example to exactly what that means. And in terms of the interactive link, which was incredibly helpful, it's not that Alec goes through design and you wait 3, 4, 5 days or whatever it is for him to turn around a change. I was able to track the entire thing live and watch as changes were being made, and was able to share the link to people I was talking with my family, with my wife, so we can all take a look at it as it's being developed. It also helped me to reflect upon, any changes I wanted to be made throughout the process. And I know on the last episode, we really didn't talk too much about the feature set and things you were able to do. You talked more about, communication as well as just being reliable and how you built your team out, which is where a lot of the article was focused on. And of course, I want to retouch on those and sort of analyze how that was executed, which was, again, very, very well. But I also do want to talk about some of the features and the abilities that you did, because you also mentioned you've never run into a scenario where you asked your team to do something that they couldn't do. And that turned out to be true. And I had made some suggestions on some of the, the animations, whether it was like a flip card or something like that. And you were able to turn it out exactly the way that I wanted to. You showed me some suggestions, and I loved some things or most things, and some of the other ones I wasn't so crazy about. So you were completely open to making revisions there and making the site interactive in the way that I wanted to. But I also do want to highlight one specific thing before we start getting into, well, actually, it integrates with a lot of the different things that we were just talking about in terms of communication and revisions and having the right team behind you. Because in any, especially in technology, and anybody who's watching this is very likely to be within technology or run a business or a business department. So they know that with any service, you're going to run into what is either going to be a dead end roadblock or it's going to be a hurdle. And it's something that you have to work to get over. And I had an issue, it was more of a challenge with my contact form. And that was just, for whatever reason, giving us problems with working. And, I was able to get it working on one place and he was able to get it working one other place. But I just want to highlight the fact that throughout the entire process, when a challenge came up, I was able to communicate with Alec very easily, and he was very flexible, and he was very dedicated to solving the problem, allocating resources and over the weekend and over time and straining out his team to make sure he got what was a very and is a very critical piece of the website for me, well, for anybody really, but because mine, works into back-end automations and actually something that I provide to clients, super important to get done. And he did. He got it done. We developed a workaround together, and now it works seamlessly. So I wanted to ask you about that, what your experience was and how you thought that whole process went.
Yeah. Technology is crazy because some days it works fine and other days it doesn't work at all. And it can be the same thing that you're working with. And it's like, but during that whole process where we were trying to solve that problem, I remember specifically we were texting and I was telling you, like, we've built 100 plus websites, and the majority of them use a custom form of one way or another, where someone has their own CRM or email marketing tool and they have a form, or you embed the link or you embed the code, and it never gives us any problem, right? But for one reason or another, it did this time. So what happens is, like, we go back and we debug it. We try to basically repeat the steps A to Z and try to figure out where is it not working. Right? Is it part of the embedded code that we got? Is it something that's overlapping with some of our custom CSS or JavaScript elements? And that process took us a little bit longer than usual. We go through usually our first 2 trials of debugging, and at that point, we normally catch a mistake. And we figure out we're able to understand exactly the root cause of that issue, and then it's very easy to fix. Not being able to figure out that root cause is always the biggest aggravation, probably for every developer or tech person that you'll ever meet. It's not so much that fact that there's an issue. It's if you do the steps that you normally do that has 95% of the problem and it doesn't work, well, now you know you're kind of in for it, right? Now you have to get real technical, start to look at loads of different documents, bunch of research, go look at different communication chains, right? You try to see if people have solved this problem before. And so that's what we did. And ultimately, it turned out that you were more than, like, the way that you approached the situation was not to sit back and let us solve it. You were actively working. We were working in tandem. You are actually the one that came up with the final solution. We just implemented it, tested it, made sure that it worked, and it did work. So that goes to show a lot of the times like how teamwork from one side to the other side can be a tremendous help. We can do a lot, but there's only so much that we can do, um, sort of on our own and trying to figure out these solutions with limited options. That was a struggle for us. It was frustrating, right? Like a lot of these problems are, and it's totally fine to admit. It's just like, we're just human, right? It frustrates us and we can't solve the problem, but it was more about dialing down again, right? And figuring out like, all right, like maybe there's an alternative solution. Let's try to figure out some ways. Maybe the code, maybe it's not working. We just have to figure out another way to do it. You helped us do that.
Yeah, I mean, it speaks to a couple different things. One, I think anybody who goes into some sort of an agreement with somebody, like if there's a problem and you're not willing to solve it, you're not willing to help be a part of the solution, you really don't have, a right to complain about it not working. And perhaps that gets a little bit to a gray area, whereas, perhaps you're the web designer, but I'm not. But at the same token, I have a unique CRM, a unique automation CRM that you haven't worked with before. And I think the issue had nothing to do with your abilities to do so or something I didn't provide you. It was, I think, just a WordPress incompatibility was really the thing, I think, because it worked completely fine on my Wix builder and it worked in test environments on the support team for my CRM, and they were able to replicate it, but just wasn't working with WordPress. So again, it's just some weird thing. But the point I'm trying to make is that you were communicative throughout the whole process, and we worked well together to get it done. And it turns out it was just a matter of embedding HTML, embedding a website within a website versus using the embed code, the iframes. So it got done. It works just as exactly the same way, functions perfectly. But I think it's important to highlight that because, again, you mentioned something in the first episode, which was it was a quote about getting started and valuing getting started over perfection. And although it's not directly related to that, you mentioned like people would rather work with someone who they know cares and that they're going to get the job done. And that's the case with you. I could have been working with someone else and they're like, hey, we just can't do this, or hey, we won't do that. Or maybe they waited until days and days later or weeks, or maybe I didn't have the live development link and I couldn't see and I couldn't participate in helping the problem solving. But the way that you facilitate the process and communicated throughout was ultimately what enabled me to even be a part of the solution. And the fact that we're sitting there texting back and forth on like a Saturday morning trying to figure it out, and it got done. So I think that was important. Also want to, and this is up to you whether or not we can include this or not, but I know you had reached out about something that was happening in your personal life with a friend of yours. So unfortunately had come down with an illness, like it was ALS, and I wanted to give you the opportunity to mention that. You mentioned that there's a GoFundMe that's set up, and I mentioned that I would, help give you a little visibility there. And I connect you with a friend of mine who also runs a brand centered around, his life, which is a diagnosis with MS. So I'm going to connect you with him, and he knows some people that may be able to help gain further exposure or provide guidance to your friend. Want to take a moment to talk about that, and we can take the link and I'll put it in the article as well as the LinkedIn post.
Yeah, sure. I appreciate it. Yeah, unfortunately, I had a friend of mine that we were college roommates for all 4 years, and he's young, very young, not even 30, and was recently diagnosed with ALS. ALS is interesting because it's a diagnosis for exclusion. It's very hard to diagnose it until you exclude a million other things. And so he's going through a process right now of trying to second and third opinions and just kind of not quite the diagnosis, but just make sure that there wasn't anything that was missed. And, he's going through a few different hospitals. So best case scenario is there comes a day where we hear maybe there's a different outcome where somebody was wrong. But as of right now, he's been officially diagnosed with ALS and is going through all the tests that they have to do in order to exclude other diseases or illnesses. They cost a good amount of money. And insurance aside, there's definitely things that he's going to have to go through that are unexpected and that will be out of pocket. And so while we can't physically go through it with him and kind of experience what he's experiencing, we can definitely take a weight off his shoulders by not having him worry so much about if he can afford some of these things. So yeah, I mean, it's a very small thing, but at this time, it's probably something that would be most efficient to him and his family. And that was for me to start a GoFundMe, which I've done, and I'll give to Dan. But the diagnosis is very new. The GoFundMe is just set up. So I'm in the process right now of making a 501c3, making this an official nonprofit. And that will take some time, but unfortunately, time is what he doesn't have. He'll be going to these check-ins whenever they tell him. He'll be, getting billed and having to pay these things whenever they tell him. And so, yeah, it's just something quick and dirty that I'm trying to do, before we finalize everything. However, it will obviously, I think both of us, me and my friend, have agreed that this will become some type of lifelong mission that we, fight against. To help him in the here and now, I set up a quick GoFundMe, but, I understand in the long run, this will become an official nonprofit, and that's where we're going to go with it. But I appreciate so much you giving me the time to talk about that. If even, one other person sees this and it affects them, and that's worth it. So,
Yeah, I mean, and of course, first of all, I hate even having to say like you're welcome, because it's not like it may seem like, I guess, like a favor, but I bring on guests to talk about them and their lives and these things. Like I'm in the process of writing out a new podcast, sort of script to make it a little bit more professional in terms of like an intro and all that. And the basis of it is it's real conversations. There's no scripts, there's no spin, and there's no pay. There's nothing behind this other than getting a guest on and highlighting them, what they do, and how they do it. And this is part of how you do it. You went through this, and again, if you don't want it to be included, I can cut it out. But like there was another issue that you had, or not issue, but an unfortunate event that I think you were at a funeral as well. And I'm mentioning this not just to talk about your personal life for no reason, but I'm mentioning it because throughout the entire process, there was no disconnect. There was no stall. There was no lack of quality of service, which I would have understood even if there were, but there still was not. And that's simultaneous to you also mentioning you had a large influx of business. So I'm trying to, put an emphasis on the fact that throughout all of that, you had the poise and the systems and the processes in place to continue providing the quality of service that you promised to me regardless. And I just think that that's an important thing to mention, because it's what's behind what's going on. And that's not exclusive to you. I'm unfortunately, going through some my own stuff right now. I don't know if you could see I'm slanted like this right now because I've completely destroyed my back. I'm on like muscle relaxers right now. So if I'm saying anything that's weird, it's probably because of that. But also, I was this weekend at my mother has gastritis, which is another extremely weird disease that it's crippling in a different way. And that's terrible. I didn't mean that as a pun. I can't believe I said that. That was not intended whatsoever.
It
Sorry.
went its own way. It did.
It was not. I don't know. Maybe that's the muscle relaxers talking, but it's a disease. In essence, she can't eat like anything, and they don't know. There's no rhyme or reason to think she can't eat. She's lost weight rapidly. I went over this weekend to see her, and she didn't even want to see me. So it's really, of course, hard to see that happening. On top of that, my other issues with my family, brother broke his knee and he's got to my point is that there's always shit going on, and it's the way that people handle it. And it's the way that they continue to go on. And again, I would have understood if you were like, hey, need to extend this a week or something. I need some time off. I'd be like, yeah, no problem. But you didn't even have to do that. So I wanted to make that point.
One thing I'll say just in response to kind of you is that it goes back to what I mentioned in the first call about my team. The processes are great. But any entrepreneur or anyone that started any or tries to start any company knows that you can't even have a process in place really without the right team. And sometimes that doesn't mean people that are physically working in the business with you. Sometimes it means having a coach or a mentor or whatever. But in my case, it means having, physical people that I love and I trust and that we've worked together for a long time. I'm able to rely on. I'm able to only be available by text because I have a trusted team that I know has been trained on and understands my process or the process that I want them to take, right? And being available by text to people that have paid you money is the least you can do, right? Like it's sort of even in a day where where you find out that your friend gets diagnosed with ALS, you're gonna have 30 seconds in that day to shoot someone a quick message, and at the very least, that's what a client is owed if you're trying to build a reputable business and a solid foundation. And I'm glad that I'm confident in knowing that I just sometimes, even in the worst days, have to be there via text. It's not that hard, right? But I'm that trustworthy in being available only by text and not being around a computer because I have such a great team and handful of resources. So just to play off of that a little bit, right? It's something I put a long time, probably over 2 years, 2.5 years, and honestly, at this point, probably $100,000 to $150,000 to try to figure out. And I'm proud to say that I have, and I think times like that show that I have. There's always work to be done, right? There's always ways to improve, but like that was a really, really big investment financially and time wise, and situations like that. The ones that we had just gone through, where I was going through my own personal thing. During that same time, my girlfriend of 9 years also lost her dad to stage 4 pancreatic cancer. Right.
Jeez.
And my best friend from college was diagnosed with ALS. And so it was a rough time. Like today, it's crazy to say all this, but today, my best friend from growing up, his mother died 8 years ago today. He was 17 years old, right? Or 18 years old. One of my best friends from playing sports growing up, his father passed away yesterday, 1 year ago, dropped out of a stroke, very randomly. So March has always been a crazy time and it's always kind of emotional. And then to have these things get thrown into it this year was a lot. It was extra. But, to see how seamless things went was a testament not only to the team, but to my efforts of building that and, how much effort it really took and risk it really took to find people like that. So, yeah.
Yeah, you used the word there, which, I mean, first of all, absolutely insane that there's so many concurrent calamities, or I don't know what the right word to use is for that, but it's absolutely crazy that that's all happening to you at the same time. But you use the word extra, and to me, I think the inverse, and it may be like an extra circumstance for you, but like that's why I have this podcast. And the other part of the description I'm working into the intro of the podcast is, we're putting, faces to the brands and to the logos. Like if you go to your website right now, it says Coleman Web Designs. It looks very professional. It conveys the message that you get work done, you have clients and all that, but like it doesn't say anything about who you are, and that this is not to your marketing tactics. It's to, you can't see that, whether it's Apple, right, or whether it's, I don't know, whether it's my company or whatever. You can't see who the people are and what they go through, the quality of person that you're dealing with or people. And that's why I have this podcast where you can just talk and get to know the people behind the brands. And there's a saying that's in sales. It was, again, by someone I keep mentioning, is Bob Reisman. And it was people who do business with people they like. And he was a very authentic and genuine guy, very strong personality, came through, and people would come to get to know him and to like him. And he did very well in sales. But like, in this day and age where you're doing less business face to face, there's, I would say, probably even less word of mouth. Things are getting thrown in your face digitally with content all day, all night, whether it's on your phone or LinkedIn. And so much of it looks so homogenous. How do you convey like the wizard behind, the Oz, right? The man behind the curtain thing. And like, that's what I try to do here. I don't bring on people and of course, we talk about their companies and stuff like that. And I don't talk with everybody to the same level of personal, conversation that I am here. I try to adapt to the guest that comes on, but that's testament to the platform. It's reflect what I see in people and try to draw out the quote ROI insights, about the person. So that's what just comes from you is how we got to talking about this. And that's what I think people need to know. And when I go to recommend Alec, they're like, oh, does he do good work? I'm like, not only does he do good work, but he's also a really good human being. And here's, these are things personal about him. And you never know. And it's not a marketing tactic. It's how people get to know you. If I were to say that to somebody, then all of a sudden they're like, oh, actually, you know what? Not only do I need a website, but my cousin has ALS and I would love to be able to support him on top of his business, like that's what it comes down to. So anyway, after that long ramble, that's what I was trying to get at. But anyway, so where we're at now, right? After all of that, we have the post QA testing, and I haven't seen any issues in terms of stability of functionality. I had some third-party widgets we plugged in there. The animations you created are all working and things like that.
And it's really just ongoing maintenance and watching that there's nothing that's breaking, right, or nothing that we could anticipate breaking throughout the first, 14 to 30 days, right? Because after that, if things are continuously going well for that period of time, then you have your weekly or your monthly maintenance check-ins and security check-ins. But aside from that, you won't need much if you can guarantee that first 2 to 4 weeks are going smoothly.
Yeah.
Right. So that's sort of what we're doing now.
I'm going to start rambling and bring us into another topic if I don't stop. But any closing remarks? Anything else you want to say? I know we're going to probably grab a beer up in Massachusetts. I'm going to an event in April. We meet face to face. But other than that,
no, man, it was a great experience. You were one of the clients that that sort of very easily can tell with people after the process, which side of the pole that they're on. And this was an efficient process because you were, on that better side, very communicative, prepared with content, knew what changes you wanted to be made, efficient with responses. So just very timely, detailed. And that's why more or less it's a very seamless process, right? We use the same team for every project. Some projects, everyone has a bad apple here and there, but you were certainly one of the better ones that I've come across in the last, year and a half, 2 years. So I appreciate that. I know that there's certainly going to be a lot more to come from this than just the website build. So that's really it. I mean, yeah.
All right, man. Well, again, I appreciate having you on. We will probably be back with an SEO episode, maybe a few months down the line, and see where I'm at in search engine rankings. Currently, my YouTube is the only thing that ranks for my podcast videos and LinkedIn posts. But anyway, Alec, thanks again for having you on. I'm going to end it now before I keep talking.
Okay.